So hey anime fans, the series name is What If Naruto Got Harem with Temari, so let's start the series. As Naruto gazed up at his closest friend and fellow soldier, disbelief flooded his cerulean eyes. He urged him to do whatever it took to save Sakura and escape, as he couldn't bear the thought of losing another dear friend. While they battled a Chihei Naruto ally on a tree branch in the woods beyond Konohagakure, those words sparked inspiration in him or perhaps helped him fully grasp the situation. Everyone was putting forth their utmost effort to combat this struggle, safeguarding all and everyone they cherished. He rose to his feet with a quiet resolve and self-assurance, made a slight scoffing noise, and then directed his gaze at Gaara, the other person exuding a demonic presence. No sooner had he finished his speech than his stunned Naruto friend would gaze at his companion in complete disbelief. War S4 Naruto Tatsakali Chine the Berlagen word. Wieder nach oben zu gehen und sich erneut mit diesem Psychopathen anzulegen? Itesha, sehr stark. War der erste Teil seiner Rede, Durchstrungen dieser neu gewonnenen Entschlossenheit, während versucht, sein Gefühl zu bändigen, indem die Fäuste ballt. Is Naruto crazy? Naruto, who thought he was ready to battle, could not afford to lose Sakura and his best friend. Specifically, this was after he heard the remainder of the ninja's statement and understood that the fierce intensity in his eyes was actually a blue flame, not red or orange, flickering along his Sharingan. Zunächst Stick, sehr stark, while er nur für sich selbst und aus Liebe zu sich selbst kämpfte, aber das war nicht richtig, denn Stärke bedeutet nicht, für sich selbst zu kämpfen, es heißt, alles zu geben, etwas oder jemanden zu beschützen, der einem wichtig ist. Nur dann haben wir die Kraft, alles zu tun, sagte Naruto und erinnerte sich an die Geschichte, die ihm der rothaarige Mann in dem Krankenhauszimmer erzählt hatte. He was enraged by the thought that he had let someone who believed that killing others was the only way to prove one was alive intimidate him. Hatte Angst vor jemandem, der genauso ist? It was Naruto, the headmaster who had excelled beyond all others. Initially, I believed we were very similar until I noticed something in your words, Naruto friend. As he glanced at him, a fox-like grin flashed toward the male, fully aware that his friend was currently depending on the cursed seal for strength instead of his own abilities. When you fight to protect something, you're fighting past your own limits, and, like Gaara, I've had no one look at me with any human decency except Iruka-sensei and 6th Headmaster Sensei. My childhood was something that will haunt me until the day I die, but unlike me, you had a family. For a split second, Gaara Tensei momentarily debated that thought after the words left mouth and was about to protest until he was interrupted by the response, it doesn't matter what your father did, what about your teammates? They're your family too, right? And you just knocked your own sister aside to get your high off killing someone? As he cast a sidelong glance at the Sankunoichi, who was quietly watching the events unfold, Naruto's anger began to escalate beyond its initial level. Naruto's friend had never witnessed the boy so resolute in his desire to fight, so tense to conclude a struggle with murderous intent. He was more aware than anyone else that Naruto was incapable of killing the thing, namely, the demon, that obstructed them. Nichts, was ik sage, 14 jetzt da halten, verdammt noch mal, ich habe zu viel meine Energie aufgewendet, dieses Ziel alles back up zu nutzen. Ich kann Naruto nicht einmal dann stoppen, wenn ich mich bewege. Naruto freundete dies für sich, während auf die Füße fiel und mit ansehen musste, wie Naruto in eine von Energie umhüllt Faust schwang. Even though he was reluctant to acknowledge it, he sensed that the boy was on the verge of doing something else that would astonish him. Now, the fight was in Naruto's hands. She stiffened, recalling her childhood with Gaara and the murderous and tender sibling had harbored since he was a child. She could manage his feelings better than most people, but did this mean it was her family's fault? Or was Adon's correct in thinking that Gaara had family who cared for him? The Sankunoichi, seeking refuge in the lower part of the surrounding trees, would have had a brief encounter with those eyes, making her flinch. It seemed as though they were validating his assertion. What would her feelings be like if something were to happen that miraculously killed or almost killed her baby brother, even though he was the thing she feared most? Naruto, eh? Regardless, he still can't hold Gaara, Temari mused, her gaze locked on those bright blue eyes. She needed to discover a means to shift her focus away from the changing revelational speech, and if Naruto had just ceased speaking at that instant, she would have accomplished this. Temari felt somewhat unsettled by the mental development or debate that was swirling in her mind. He halted, grinned, released his clenched fists, and shifted his gaze from the vessel of Shukaku's sister to Gaara. Ich hatte nie eine Familie, ich weiß nicht einmal, wie es ist, die Zuneigung eines Bruders oder einer Schwester zu empfinden, denn ich war immer allein, ausgegrenzt und verachtet. Meine Existenz schien nur Schmerz zu bringen. Aber du hast einfach deine Schwester zurückgeschlagen und hattest sie wahrscheinlich umgebracht. Du die anderen Sand-Ninjas seid in unser Zuhause gekommen und habt versucht, es zu zerstören, sagte I'm an RDO, and while I have no one to love or protect, I'll protect everyone. Wir sagte, zu der Welt hin bilden sich Gedanken im Innersten der Herzen und Köpfe zeugen, wurden die Blicke aus allen Himmelsrichtungen auf den jungen Ruin. Naruto's friend could only blink before smirking slightly, lowering his head to the side as he mumbled something at the blonde. Show off. Temari remained unmoved by this remark until it finally registered, I'm part of everyone too. Gaara could only smirk as he gazed hungrily at the newfound determination, for it would make his blood all the sweeter when he tasted it. However, the Shukaku vessel was taken aback upon seeing the boy's hand seals, exclaiming, his cage Bushin no spirit art, so what if he creates a few clones? They can't save you. Gaara could only guess how far off the estimates for a few clones were, as suddenly thousands of Narutos began to fill the treetops in every direction the ninjas might have hoped to occupy. Nani? Naruto's friend could only stare in astonishment, as he had never before seen such a massive reproduction done so easily. Who was this child standing before him? It was impossible for Naruto to have achieved this, he couldn't possibly have advanced so much in merely a month, right? After witnessing the Naruto 2000 hit combo, he could only come to the conclusion that he was insane for believing it was all real. Temari gaped in disbelief as Naruto assaulted her brother and inflicted injuries upon him. She saw, for the first time ever, the bloodlust in her brother's eyes, even at a great distance for her own safety, reach a new level of desire. He considered that idiot with blonde hair, although she concedes he was more talented than he seemed, to be a sufficient challenge for the true form of the Shukaku. This was an achievement that had only been realized by the Uchiha before, but even he couldn't have inflicted more than a small flesh wound on Gaara at that moment. He released it. The true form of that, the demon inside Gaara. While watching her brother engage in an unending fight against Naruto, the frog boss himself, bolstered by a summoning spirit art, she thought, we're all dead. Where could the world's most disappointing ninja have learned to do that, let alone had any chance of defeating Gaara? Temari was astonished by the resolve she witnessed in the achievement of what she had deemed an unachievable task, overcoming her younger sibling and the demon residing in him. As her opponent's name was shouted in battle cry fashion, she clung to the tree where she had taken position, attempting to block out the jubilant Uzuyama Naruto. War Gaara Aben follows Signer Darien again, Dire shoots and Volta. Everyone had been observing Naruto as he ascended the Shukaku beast's head, managing to awaken the slumbering boy and neutralize the full power of the demonized raccoon. He was thankful to the frog boss for making him an official subordinate, as this allowed him to land the strike. He would not have accepted any form of defeat. They're all watching me now, just like back then, he said, as memories of the recent moments rushed into his mind and sight. After declaring that he would protect everyone because he had no one else, Naruto began to form the hand seals for his Kage Bushin no Spirit technique. While he anticipated a decent figure, the thousands of complete shadow replications he had produced surprised even him. But this was not the moment to commemorate his success. He charged at the mental Gaara without hesitation, counting every visible Naruto as they struck him with a flurry of punches and kicks he named the Naruto 2000 hit combo. This assault sent the boy reeling and thwarted his ability to use his sand. At that moment, he needed to monitor it, despite the attack not having a pleasant flavor. During the bell test, the 6th headmaster had inflicted the 1,000 years of pain on him, accompanied by the exploding tag that shouted, "Ha!" For a whole minute after Naruto struck the point directly under the tail, however, it appeared as though nothing occurred. After propelling Gaara and himself backward, Gaara was experiencing the effects of losing the sand that sustained his demonic traits. Gaara found himself relishing this battle even more than his fight against the Uchiha, as Naruto appeared to be a source of endless surprises, each of which reignited his struggle for existence with fresh intensity after every assault. Although he had not expected that the complete transformation would be necessary for this plan of destruction initiated by his country, at least in his own mind it was a justification that he could observe how it would react, Thus, he allowed his body to be the basis for a raccoon made of pure sand that would rise up and devastate a large portion of the forested area. Initially, Naruto didn't foresee this, but he was ready to adapt to the situation as he grinned and spread blood on his fingers. Now, I'll get to show off my new move. I bet Naruto will be jealous. Okta. I need to save Sakura-chan, protect my Naruto friend, and help that girl Temari, or whatever her name is, the Sand Lady, so I can't spare any time for that. Upon exclaiming, summoning technique, and, having paid the blood price for the spirit art, Naruto stood with a smirk atop the boss frog's head, looking over at Gaara, who was mounted within the head on top of the Shukaku's head. He quickly realized that the frog boss's tongue was coiled around him, protecting him from the sand outside his body. But what about the sand that was starting to affect him from below? This constituted the entirety of his brief memory. What should I do about that foolish fox? Rubbish, awful rubbish. Naruto Kainetside Hata, meine neue Bewertung vorzunehmen, bad her Dino in Bestin, meinen Teil seiner Kurnerjitsu geben. Ultimately, if Naruto were to die, the more powerful demon would also meet its end. From here on out, the remainder is quite clear. Naruto's mentality and determination shifted, overcoming Gaara, who was likewise greatly fatigued and battered in the fight. Their teammates retrieved both of them, and while the battle had ended, the lingering thoughts it left behind had not. Temari was on Konkuro's other side as they navigated through the trees, supporting Gaara from under his shoulders. She could only see or acknowledge that Naruto had beaten her brother and ended the Shukaku transformation, and that they had a final battle atop the trees in which they both were temporarily knocked out. She and her brother found their sibling frightened and beaten by the creeping blonde, and she feared that Gaara had lost. Of course, the Kunoichi kept this information to herself until she heard the one line that would change her life forever. Aside from Naruto's promise to protect everyone, Temari, Kankuro, I'm sorry. After that struggle, their brother had conveyed his remorse to them. The only priority right now was to get Gaara to safety. She could express her gratitude later. She envisioned that anything they said could have altered Gaara's personality, and that being defeated by the world's most inconceivable ninja might have been another factor. Following approximately 2.5 years, a boy, feeling an intense boredom, would be seated in the shinobi village of Konohagakure, the Hidden Leaf Village, consuming his 14th bowl of ramen from the Ichiraku ramen stand. What's good? The old man at the counter inquired, as he prepared his regular client's 15th bowl of miso pork ramen. The rich blue hues would pop up immediately from the bowl, imparting an innocent flavor to the blonde ninja, who would respond with enthusiasm, yeah! More ramen! Naruto, the Hidden Leaf Village's noisiest ninja, was off to a great start this day. He usually became bored and slightly restless when nothing occurred, but the knowledge that he would be called upon to complete his A-rank mission later in the day kept him in good spirits. Before Naruto could contemplate the vague mission that 6th Headmaster Sensei had mentioned to him, another bowl of ramen was set in front of him as he turned to completely annihilate the unsuspecting food. The owner of the Ichiraku ramen stall could only smile and shake his head passively. Well, that's our number one best customer for you. The 5th headmaster referred to a package in the goddamn headmaster's office that held detailed information about a mission request document. She would let out a sigh and turn to recline in her chair, hoping to have a drink and eliminate the paperwork. She didn't dislike her job, but the paperwork was awful. The 5th headmaster would simply smirk when her assistant Shizune entered her office casually and tossed her the packet, saying, "Tell me what it says, Shizune." I wonder what else I need to do before the covert mission that 6th Headmaster Sensei mentioned begins? Naruto made the decision to see how Sakura-chan was faring, but at that moment he opted to dash away. A Jounin stood before him with a smirk and a poof. Yo, stopped Naruto sofort, Tsukta ein wenig zurück vor dem Unerwarteten auftauchen, doch konnte nur return, Sexter Kopfmeister Sensei. The boy walked down the village's bustling streets, mostly ignoring the cold glares of the villagers, for he had realized that he had people who cared about him now. The gray-haired Jounin would smirk beneath his mask. Although no one could see it distinctly, the movement of his eye indicated that he was at least attempting to smile, correct? The younger ninja made a smirking expression and moved his finger under his nose in a self-assured manner, saying, "Hello Naruto, I take it you're prepared to hear about your mission?" "Absolutely, 6th Headmaster Sensei. Could you clarify what this mission is about? The older man, smirking beneath his mask and feigning ignorance of the details of the incident, led his student toward the tower of the requested headmaster. He followed his teacher's instructions exactly, and upon entering the headmaster of Konohagakure's office, he did what he deemed necessary. Hyo-bachan. The 5th headmaster twitched and growled, exclaiming, "I told you to stop calling me that!" Without saying anything, Naruto just smiled and lifted his shoulders. "Anyway, Obachan, what's this A-rank mission you have for the future headmaster?" With a sigh, she noted his enthusiasm and offered a slight smirk as the 5th headmaster opted to indulge Naruto's ego for a brief moment. The 5th headmaster stressed the last word intentionally to seize the younger ninja's complete focus. "Well, Naruto-kun, prior to revealing the mission details, I want to clarify why you are the best choice for this job and why you will be working solo." He could be counted on for missions that needed collaboration, but Naruto seldom had to weigh the option of undertaking a solo mission at the Jounin level, despite the fact that he could likely already be seen as Jounin level. Instead, he could only look at her with curiosity, his eyes narrowing as he wondered why he was being sent on a solo mission when he knew he performed best with Sakura-chan and 6th Headmaster Sensei. "Come on, Obachan, just say it already, why am I the best fit for this mission apart from being the village's top ninja?" At this moment, the 6th Headmaster, who was watching quietly, cut off Naruto's comment. "The number one loudest and surprising ninja to be sure," the blonde remarked with a straightforward sneer, crossing his arms over his chest and raising his head in the air. Yeah, so I've heard," the 5th headmaster said, stifling a laugh before remembering the information she intended to share with Naruto. The 5th headmaster took a moment to check if the boy could understand that during the 3rd headmaster's era, our present allies from Suna, particularly the current Kazekage Gaara, managed to defeat him and thereby change his method of proving his existence. It is this fact that acknowledges the friendship between your two, as witnessed by current parties from both sides, after Naruto-kun's mission to retrieve Gaara. The boy, after all, experienced exponential growth while in the company of that perverted legendary Sannin. The boy would stop to glance at his older sibling-like figure before considering her seriously. It was clear that this mission was connected to his friendship with Gaara, so could he take it for granted that he might need to travel to the hidden village of Sand? 5th Headmaster Bachan, since what you're telling me is basically about Gaara, does that mean this Super A-rank mission is a request from the Kazekage himself? As a hand moved to stroke his chin momentarily, Naruto would regard the headmaster with a hint of curiosity or perhaps with complete incomprehension. Nevertheless, the 5th headmaster did not reply straight away to our preferred ninja. The 6th headmaster, however, remarked, "It appears that even Naruto has figured out how to say what is obvious. Naturalisch war dieser Versuch, Naruto zu irritieren, Mr. Falkreich. Allerdings hätte vor 2,5 Jahren größere Erfolgschancen gehabt." "What? I do just fine at stating things, 6th Headmaster Sensei." The 5th headmaster began, "Yes, this is a direct request from the current Kazekage and must be fulfilled to the letter since he was so adamant about this arrangement." And Naruto was instantly attracted to it for one simple reason: Gaara wasn't passionate about anything that he could ever tell. At times, it was still too tempting to miss the opportunity to humiliate or belittle their younger associate. He recognized that his friend was enhancing his social skills and acceptance, but was it really necessary to be so passionate about recruiting Naruto for a mission? The cerulean hues appeared to widen in apparent surprise at the notion that Gaara's name could be mentioned in the same sentence as any term related to passion or emotions. "Alright, Gaara wants me to help him with something. Well, I always come through for my precious people, so I promise to get it done no matter what." As he spoke those words, his trademark fox-like smirk would pleasantly dart across his face, making him look childlike yet endearing. The 5th headmaster wished to hear those words accompanied by her own smirk and mental check, although she was unaware of when she began to use the kun honorific instead of her more endearing term brat. It was amusing to play on his ego. Als Zeichen der guten Beziehungen zwischen Sand und Leaf mussten wir jemanden nach Suna schicken, dort etwa ein Jahr lang direkt dem Kazekage zu helfen. Wenn du schon vermutet hast, Walter niemanden anderen als seinen besten Freund, Naruto-kun, sagte sie. And perhaps it's because we've organized a kind of surprise to guarantee the happiness of two oblivious individuals while keeping our relations intact. Hey, I'm good, she remarked. The silent Jounin, having seen the desired response from his former pupil and completed his own personal mission, turned to vanish in a grin-inducing poof. "Well, kid, best of luck, you'll need it," he stated. At the moment that one thought crossed his mind, the young blonde's mouth was starting to close slowly after his jaw had dropped abruptly. Once he became headmaster, it was anticipated that he would leave Konoha, the village that had become his home and would be his power residence, for a year. "Bachan, mine's dudas air like," Naruto mused to himself, "this isn't something I can do. No, leaving everyone for another year is just not an option," when he suddenly heard a voice that was both familiar and annoying. "Kid, since you stated that you would do anything for your precious people, you find yourself at a loss. We are not going back on our promise, are we?" The Nine Beasts sported an atrociously self-satisfied expression, aware that his ship would do this no matter what. "Who knows, you could even enjoy yourself in Suna, quit jabbering, Kitsune team. Ich halte remain versprechen, Baka. However, I just came back from a training trip with legendary Sanin, and we still haven't found our friend Naruto." Naruto was suddenly overcome by a newly formed despair, wondering if he had stayed in Konohagakure for another year, would his friend have ended up as Orochimaru's vessel? "The thought of the Uchiha boy becoming Orochimaru's vessel is killing him," the fifth headmaster said, watching the boy's clear signs of depression and giving him a knowing smirk that was accompanied by a slight flicker in his red hues. "Should there be a chance to revive our Naruto friend by heading to Sand, I'm all in." The fifth headmaster could only smile as he dismissed him, telling him to prepare for his departure. As he stowed his belongings in a bag, Naruto thought, "Okay, I should probably fill up my frog wallet and find someone to, pay the old man for the ramen I usually have while I'm gone before saying goodbye to everyone." As Naruto began to endorse this plan, the Nine Beasts' words echoed through his mind. "Well, kid, perhaps you should do all of the above, but consider your details a bit more carefully. It's possible you're overlooking a few things." "Indeed, and what exactly could that be, you foolish fox one?" Upon being questioned by the Nine Beasts, Naruto began to scrutinize his plan carefully, but he found no faults with it. "PSSHTT, I don't see anything that's missing or overlooked at all. Ibaki Kitsune, none, air small, TG stands for Sektas Andor Fund Pax Nu Ramen und China Lesserliche Mentoren Schwarze Trainings und Zusein. Es handelt sich eine Monstengegend, du musst die Hassel angemessen kleiden. Ich bin mir sicher, dass du mehr von deinen Ninja-Waffen und vielleicht auch anderen Dingen, die dir gefallen, brauchst. Das würde das 29 dem blondhaarigen Shinobi gesagt haben, wenn es sich nicht mit einem und Naruto verbunden hätte. "Ah, das bedeutet, dass ich jetzt einkaufen gehen muss," Naruto muttered, despising the fact that the Baka Kitsune was right, while he mentally went over the phrases the Nine Beasts had taught him and observed that his traveling pack contained nothing but ramen packages and black-orange jumpsuits. That afternoon, Naruto completed all the errands he needed to run before his mission started at around 5 o'clock. After withdrawing sufficient cash from the bank, the teenager purchased clothes, kunai, explosive tags, a couple of soldier pills, a medical kit, justifying this with the need to learn how to treat his comrades' wounds, and a sketch pad for his newly discovered artistic talent. He had also convinced Sakura to withdraw money from his bank account to purchase 15 bowls of ramen each day. "Great," said someone who was overly happy as he walked with confidence to his apartment to complete the packing. That was his intention, at least until he saw a note on his door instructing him to go to the headmaster's tower ASAP. In other locations, a solely alluring kunoichi would be seen positioned before the headmaster and her personal assistant, Shizune. Her hair possessed the golden allure of pristine desert sand, and the lavender kimono highlighted her pale skin. The young woman was easily identifiable by her tough smirk and a forehead protector that resembled a necklace or bandana around her neck, featuring the sand insignia. While she waited patiently for a reply, the fifth headmaster turned to the younger kunoichi and inquired, "Ah, Temari, I was told you would be coming to collect the little package for your brother?" After bowing respectfully to the headmaster of Konohagakure, Temari would just nod. "Meine Tätigkeit als Verbindungsperson unser in beiden Dörfern möchte mit zum idealen Ziel, Naruto abzuholen. Mein Bruder würde niemand anderem diese Aufgabe betragen," sagte sie. Temari blinked slightly upon hearing a voice next to the headmaster pose a straightforward question, "How are things with you and Shikamaru?" As Shizune folded her arms across her chest, the silver hues settled on her. She contemplated the number of times this question had been posed to her and how many times she had disliked her response. "There is nothing with Shikamaru," despite the fact that it was indeed simpler for her to pick up Naruto and escort him to the hidden village of sand. As Shizune recognized that she had mentioned a subject likely to have been covered before, her expression would momentarily turn into a frown. Nevertheless, her agitation on behalf of the Sannin persisted. With a small smile, she nodded and looked at the fifth headmaster while the Sannin opted to pose Temari a few questions. The fifth headmaster began with the question, "What's your opinion on Naruto, Temari? What is the reason for your inquiry, Headmaster Sama?" The unflappable young woman remarked, lifting an eyebrow and holding back a flush as the question took her by such surprise that she could not hide her astonishment at who had posed it. Meanwhile, Naruto had just managed to get past two irritating Onbu members who were behaving rudely toward him. It is true that they generally treat him with respect, particularly now, but there are still some who have completely rejected the vessel of the Nine Beasts. Ultimately, since the legendary Sannin was training him to become the person he would need to be later in life, a single Rasengan sufficed for both of them to reflect. Shortly after all this, he proceeded to the headmaster's office. As he opened the door a few seconds later, it was quiet following a remark that indicated no special interest in the man. Before the fifth headmaster could greet him, his blue eyes were attracted to a quite appealing young woman with a slim yet curvy physique. He slightly flushed as he wondered who the lovely woman was, until he recognized a familiar face, hair, and forehead protector. "Temari?" he inquired and received a small wave along with a simple nod in response. "Urzakta, Kenichiwa Naruto," as Temari's body arched and she blushed while staring at him. Her legs seemed to wrap around the male's waist, while Naruto's face was pressed against her chest as he pinned her beneath him with his arms. The boy dashed forward to embrace the older kunoichi, but he seemed to stumble over his own feet, inadvertently tackling Temari as he went down. Blissfully, the thought had occurred to her, but neither Temari nor Naruto had chosen to exit their somewhat uncomfortable situation, as they actually found pleasure in their sexual positions. Until then, the laughter of the fifth headmaster and Shizune had Naruto inspired to rise and extend his hand to Temari in support as he said, "Temari, I'm really sorry. I was trying to hug you and tripped, and I am sorry." Understanding that it was accidental and that he had no malicious intent, Naruto helped her up while flushing deeply. He hoped to God she hadn't interpreted it that way, otherwise, he'd die. At that moment, the Nine Beasts decided to interfere with his thoughts. "Well, kid, I never imagined you had the strength to go after her like that. It seems you were just a bit too driven by lust for her. All you needed was to secure her and find out her feelings." "Perhaps you can," Naruto growled, "shut your mouth, you perverted fox." As a reaction to Nine Beasts' inappropriate comments about Temari's body, he turned an even deeper shade of red while he took them into account, then stopped. "Ik mina, Zakta as he assisted her in getting up, Temari regarded him. The apologetic look on his face convinced her that his actions were not those of a pervert, but rather the result of having tripped over his own feet. She let out a sigh and pondered why she hadn't shoved him away earlier. She was prepared to dismiss this as merely another trivial incident, but upon hearing him mention a lewd fox, Temari understood that the Nine Beast was contained within him and might be spurring him on in a twisted manner. With a fierce intent to kill, she slammed the unlucky boy's fist onto the wall of the headmaster's office and hissed his name. "Naruto. Pervert, Zakta Z. Anders Hauptstunden später wurde der fünfte Kaufmeister sagen, ich bezweifle, dass du heute noch aufbrichst, Naruto nach Suna zu begleiten. Ich werde für dich ein Hotelzimmer reservieren, in dem du bis zu ihrer morgigen Abreise bleiben kannst." Dabei sah ihn leicht seufzenden. Upon hearing this, our most amicable ninja just replied, "No, she can stay at my place since I have an unused guest room. And I'd feel bad if Temari had to sleep in a hotel because, I got knocked out from that stupid fox," blushed inside. The fifth headmaster was on the verge of proposing that Temari remain at Naruto next, but it seemed he had anticipated her move, which benefited her personal agenda. She glanced at the Sannin, smiled, and inquired, "Temari, what are your feelings about this?" The moment the kunoichi refrained from making an immediate remark indicating disapproval. Good, now off you go," said the fifth headmaster. At another place, Kaze Kagegaru would be seated in his office, reviewing a document that Konoha had sent him a week earlier. He simply relished the occasional review of it. "Kaze Kage-sama, greetings. Regarding the specifics of Naruto's stay in Suna, I would like to emphasize some future aspirations by extending his week-long visit to a year's duration. Perhaps if you agree to this request, we could make a small wager, Should you win, we will grant your request to make Naruto a permanent Sannin. However, Gaara, intrigued to see how this would turn out for him, found himself gazing at the page as he kept skimming through the other details. The concept of incorporating his soul best friend into his village as a ninja was sufficient to secure the Kazekage's approval. Master Sama requests unusual ideals. After the headmaster's abrupt dismissal, Temari had time to reflect and began to privately question why she hadn't protested about spending the night at Naruto's place. She considered, maybe it's just because he can be trusted, aside from his perversion. Even though the battles with Gaara were slow-going, Temari rarely placed her trust in others. However, he did somewhat save her brother. The Sannin halted at the sound of her unofficial guide exclaiming, "Aha!" with much pleasure. For the first time in his life, Naruto was a host and would be hosting a visitor for the night, and he grinned. As he came to a halt in front of his apartment at about 6:25 p.m., it was still too early to consider going to bed. This made the ninja emit a highly expressive aha. Okay, Destin Naruto, Variantur die Torfnitiant sich Zurzeitig Telta, Temari den Fortschritt zu lassen. Hey, since I have a guest here, it means I can finally cook for someone too. Of course, this line of thought produced a fox-like grin on his face immediately, and our one and only Nine Beast made a few comments, as was to be expected. Are you positive, kid, that this wouldn't have a disastrous impact on her health? Amidst the laughter, Nine Beast was rather taken aback that he had come to that conclusion independently. No pun intended. Naruto let out a mental growl before replying to his inner demon, "Shut up, you baka kitsune! I can cook just fine now, and you know it. I'm still angry at you for getting me into trouble with Temari before, so either speak up or don't say anything." Well, kid, all I did was what your own body and mind were already doing, letting you know you're attracted to her. And hey, with age comes some wonderful experience, kid, Nine Beast said with a sigh before grinning as innocently as he could manage, more like an evil grin. At times he had felt nothing but hatred for the fox, yet somehow these peculiar arguments served as proof of their clumsily expressed connection. As he turned to see Temari at his door, Naruto could have sworn he heard another voice. "Kommst du Naruto? Fragte sie ihn mit hochgezogener Braue." At that moment, he was suddenly overtaken by a furious flush, and Nine Beast won the conversation. The kunoichi mused, perhaps he's not entirely hopeless. As she entered his apartment's living room, her surprise slightly feigned. It was true that there were empty ramen packets strewn about near a door she presumed led to his room, but Temari figured that the worst of the ramen trash was behind that door. As she turned to look, she noticed that the boy with blonde hair was still outside. She positioned herself at the doorway just as he faced the entrance. Her lips were left ajar and her words escaped them as she jumped in reproach, a priceless reaction. "Are you coming to Naruto?" The woman with an animalistic demeanor crossed her arms over her chest and remarked, Did you forget I was here already, Naruto?" Temari frowned at the notion of her host forgetting her, not that she cared, but that you do, resonated in a small part of her mind that hadn't been heard in years. She presumed he was either deep in thought or possibly in conflict with the Nine Beasts inside him. Temari continued to argue with her conscious mind, saying, "I was always just tolerated as Gaara's sister, so one boy forgetting my presence doesn't mean anything." It is true, but isn't it sad that the only boy who really wanted to meet Temari and be her friend? Temari groaned, looking up to see Naruto's shape moving around in terror. "He's just a friend, so I figured it would only bother me a little bit. Is there something I overlooked?" She considered, incapable of believing the opportunities her own imagination was presenting her. With a slight laugh, her thoughts replied, "You missed everything he said and then some." He began to think, surprisingly without the Nine Beasts' influence, that he would never been able to forget about her if he could. This was justified by the fact that he couldn't forget any of his friends on his own terms. When Temari asked him that question, he blushed because she thought he had forgotten about her, but in fact, he was discussing her with the Nine Beasts. "No, Temari-chan, I haven't been able to forget you." The shinobi went on without questioning his words, knowing them to be true. Nine's outburst allowed him to infiltrate Naruto's mind and implant the memory of the boy feeling Temari's body beneath him. "Chan, look, I told you that you were just hunting for some slender, rough attitude and would find Sand Ninja," Nine Beast remarked. "It appears my little kid is attempting to mature just a bit. He recognizes that he likes what he sees and feels." Upon understanding that cursed Hirosanin and Fox were beginning to taint his thoughts, he began to dash about in a frenzy. "She is truly beautiful," he said, and I felt somewhat at ease. he added. Moreover, he genuinely enjoyed their spontaneous situation, but did that mean he was betraying Sakura's love? The young person was beginning to feel even more bewildered, and had it not been for the hand that clutched his shoulder, he could have descended into a state of mental instability. Nani? Ein wenige Überrasch von der Bewegung wurden sich umdrehen, bis einer bekannten Kunoichi ins Gesicht grinst. As he found himself staring at Temari, speechless and unable to utter a sound, a warm tone would settle on his cheeks. Man? She's pretty. Temari would smirk and place her finger under his chin. So you think I'm pretty, Naruto? At least he had taken it for granted that his thoughts were exactly what they were. So you believe I'm quite Naruto? The Kunoichi, while not indicating it, was quite pleased by his innocent compliment regarding her appearance, in contrast to certain statements made about her. With a wild smirk on her face, she took her finger away from under Naruto's chin and said, "He thinks I'm pretty." Temari of the Sand was the Kunoichi, and she didn't possess emotions as accessories. Therefore, her first instinct to blush at his compliment was something she forced herself against. You said he was just a friend, why does it matter to you? Then, the Sandman could not provide a respectable reply immediately, so he opted for a polite response, if that's the right term, that was aggressive. Shut up. What difference does it make if Naruto found her attractive or not? It was only Naruto, so what he said didn't really matter, right? But he is important, right? He. While her inner voice kept talking, Temari replied mentally, I don't care if you're my mind, if you don't shut up, it's just nice to get a compliment from a boy without the usual nonsense that follows, that's all. And she nodded quickly to affirm their statement. Temari, this is somewhat audacious, but do you mean to suggest that you would like to commend Naruto's physique as others do yours? This was the unexpected reply from what she had just come to understand was her own deviant mind. Nah, was this das? Moreover, he is only 15, and I won't make a statement like that about Naruto. Despite her generally lethal mindset and being cool-headed and sensible, Temari was troubled to discover that she was a pervert. Temari, while you were relishing the feeling of him being on top of you, did his age of 15 truly make a difference? The Kunoichi blushed violently because the comment contained some embarrassing truth. She was lucky, though, that Naruto's speech interrupted her and shifted her attention away from the odd thoughts speeding through her mind. Naja, why, ukamasizi, versucht zu antworten, why, ja, natürlich finde ich die hübsch, während her Schwestern mit den Fingern zuckte, als wäre Hinata's Verhalten einmal geprägt. He thought, you're not just pretty. You're beautiful, as he attempted to regain some semblance of composure that was completely gone. At this point, Naruto began to observe that her complexion was somewhat, shall we say, red. Temari-chan, are you alright? You're all red and stuff, he said, narrowing his eyes as she seemed to raise a brow at him. Temari could only manage to say, as she calmed herself with her mind not focused. With a smirk in response to his worry, she replied, I'm fine, but how about we look for something to eat? And what's up with you calling me Temari-chan now? Considering that she was actually a bit hungry and Chan wasn't exclusively linked to Sakura, food would serve as the best distraction. When Naruto heard the question that followed Temari's statement, he was interrupted from his thoughts. He had to think about when they began using the Chan honorific with her name. With a shrug, he signaled his ignorance of when this phenomenon had started. Ich weiß nicht, aber jetzt bist du der Erste, die mein wunderbares Kochen Temari-chan probiert, he stated, recognizing that he was unaware of when it started. Oh God, weiteten sich diese Augen und hefteten sich auf die fröhliche Gestalt der Erwartungsvollen Naruto. Doch Temari konnte nur verlegen stehen bleiben, als sie sich Naruto beim Abendessen zubereiten vorstellte. Mit meinem Glück, dachte sie, nachdem sie vergeblich versucht hatte, anzusagen, dass sie stattdessen kochen würde. Der Tod sollte schnell sein, aber, Temari seufzte, als sie sich auf eine nahegelegene Couch setzt. Sie wundert sich darüber, wie es geschafft hatte, sie zu einer Zustimmung zu überreden. Und das in ihren Augen war ein Unfall im Mordestand. Das muss ihm wirklich viel bedeutet haben, sagte sie. Go back to 5 minutes before. Following the period of relative calm she had gone through, the voice in her head began to assault her. Nani, is your cooking wonderful? Temari observed Naruto as he acknowledged her with a nod and then broke into his characteristic grin. Temari suggested, maybe I should take over cooking instead. You know of your curiosity. Nah, it's fine Temari-chan. Also, you're my First guest ever, so I want to host well. After the Janan had blinked, he shook his head vigorously as a way to say no to her suggestion. At that moment, the 9 beasts within Naruto began to speak after a brief silence of his own, stating, "She thought you can do it, kid." Temari began to privately fret about the possibility of having to eat his food if she failed to convince Naruto to alter his decision. It was reassuring, however, that he would make this temporary arrangement more agreeable by offering to prepare dinner. Temari said, crossing her arms and folding them over her chest as if to emphasize that knowledge, the host doesn't always have to cook Naruto, and I probably have more culinary expertise than you. Then she quickly decided to heat her inner voice, "It's Naruto, anything he cooks is bound to be dangerous for my health." Danvers Prushik, das Beste Essen zuzubereiten, das du gekostet hast. Auf main word is for loss, so take time ninja, weißt du. Temari's assertion that she'd cook better made Naruto let out a sorrowful sigh, as it called his culinary abilities into doubt. "She really doesn't think I can do it," he said, but many had doubted his abilities and proven them wrong. "He is eager to prepare a meal for you, but do you truly wish to bring sadness to your friend by being the first and only guest who rejects his cooking, Temari?" With a sigh, Temari gazed into Naruto's blue eyes and observed the sadness concealed within. The kunoichi attempted to lift his spirits by producing a semblance of a smirk with her thin lips and winking at him. "Octanuder auf, das ist nicht wie Ramen schmeckt, sagte sie." The conclusion of flashback. Alta für mich kochen. Temari war trotz ihrer Angst vergleichsweise zufrieden. Even though she was the most independent person around, she couldn't expect either of her brothers to offer to cook for her, so it felt nice to have someone show interest in taking care of her for a change. While the loudest ninja in Konoha was preparing dinner for himself and Temari, he was in his kitchen. Alta Temari beweisen, das Kochen konnte, und auf sein Wort war verlass. Naruto promised to prepare the finest dinner she had ever tasted, but he never followed through. This embodied his nindo, his way of the ninja. As the chef of the house stated that dinner would be prepared in roughly an hour and a half, Temari had to wait. Although she didn't have many items to arrange, she was intrigued by the state of this room that hadn't been used. Temari walked down the corridor to the door next to the one that had a trail of ramen packages leading to Naruto's room. She opened the door to show the room she would be staying in, saying, "It's actually, not bad," as she closed the door behind her, allowing the Sannin to get a better view as she fully entered. It was hard to believe that Naruto kept this room in such good condition, and as she set down her travel pack, she began to question, why does he only take such good care of this room? The walls were white, as was the case for most rooms in this building, but they were neither dingy nor cracked. This room seemed as if it had just been painted. In the vicinity of the window, a bed was discovered, and curtains featuring the well in a black and red checkered pattern were present. A reasonably large closet was also present. At that time, the kunoichi discovered an object resembling a small journal next to the doorframe of the closet. The cover, which was bound in leather, seemed to be in reasonably good condition. Normally, a ninja wouldn't pay much attention to such items as they usually lack anything she would find interesting to read. However, her curiosity about Naruto's thoughts and feelings was piqued, as he was the most surprising ninja and no one could genuinely claim to know how he felt or thought. Temari blinked, something was off, this wasn't her usual behavior. Temari, on the other hand, when have you had the chance to just be yourself? It was hat das damit zu tun, dass ich mich, für meine Verhältnisse, ausgerechnet dazu verleitet fühle, dieses Journal zu lesen? Ich bin mir doch sicher, dass es sich nicht öffnen lassen sollte, tragt nicht mit seinem. Temari was beginning to loathe the inner voice in her head, as it had recently only served to irritate her. This time, it had a point, but she didn't intend to concentrate on it for the moment. "Temari, you've always been the tough one, haven't you? I'm curious, you've always felt alone despite having your brothers, right? Well, considering that Naruto has always been on his own, perhaps observing how someone else genuinely is could help you value your true self a little more? Okay, forget that. We both know you want to see what he wrote because we want to understand how he thinks," Temari said. "Das hat keinen Sinn, es ist einfach nur ein Buch. Ich muss mich nicht mit Naruto's privaten Angelegenheiten beschäftigen. Sein Leben geht mich nichts an." Temari had stated that it was none of her concern, but the kunoichi's curiosity had gotten the better of her. Additionally, a small voice in her mind kept nagging her about how Naruto had accidentally left his journal in that room years ago and that she had never thought to search for it. She cringed inwardly at the opening line, "Naruto, what you don't see." In reality, how different could he be from what he showed everyone? How much could he differ from the image she and everyone else had of him? Naruto was putting in a lot of effort in the kitchen to get the perfect dinner ready for his guests to savor. The blonde ninja, despite being a fool at times, had honed some cooking skills while traveling with the legendary Sannin. He wasn't perfect, of course, and the real reason he told her they would need to wait an hour and a half for dinner was his belief that he would make a mistake before managing to do it correctly. AHK. I lost track of the correct way to blend rice and wine so that the mixture doesn't retain too much alcohol. He was nearly terrified, but then he smiled. His advantage lay in the fact that 9Beast always remembered everything, allowing him to extract information from that stubborn fox. Okay, Dubaka Kitsune. Help me out, what the hell did Hirosen say about this when we were in the land of waves? He had hoped it would be at least that simple. The 9Beast, positioned behind his gauge, observed Naruto's mental image and chuckled at the look of terror on the boy's face. Just as his 6th and 5th headmasters did before him, he was unable to resist the chance to humiliate or infuriate his vessel. "And what if I decline to assist you, Kit? After all, you did say that you would prepare the best meal she ever tasted." "That doesn't include me, Kit." While Naruto left the rice/wine mixture for now and moved on to prepare some spiced chicken, he vented his rage at the kitsune trapped within him. "Baka Kitsune," he stated, "I presumed you safeguarded your own, and doesn't that imply safeguarding them from errors as well? Gah! Damn you, you foolish fox!" He felt that, in certain respects, his friend was intent on being a jerk at the time when Naruto required his help. "None, Kit, Tsunakes nutzt du deine Energy, den Alkohol vom Geschmack zu trennen. Danach beginnst du langsam, das von dir getrennt mit einer weiteren bereits vorbereiteten Speise oder vielleicht etwas Zitronensaft zu verdienen." But then again, if you really love his company tonight, Kit, maybe you should give her a massage. You know you liked how she felt," he said, smiling with demonic malice. It was something of great worth, and the greater demon would never tire of it while he lives. Disregarding the Kitsune team's comment, Naruto chose to heed the advice as he cooked the seasoned chicken. Nevertheless, he could not stop thinking about a certain Kunoichi. Naruto felt his face flush as he found himself unable to disregard the lewd comments that the 9Beasts began to plant in his thoughts. At last, he let out a sigh. Those silverish hues would begin to scan the journal's pages, reading every word in her line of sight with care and speed. Once the opening statements were interpreted, she started to imagine a Naruto that was entirely different from the one she believed she knew well enough. First journal entry, Naruto. I don't know why everyone hates me so much, but they all look at me as if I was nothing more than a monster. I just wanted someone, anyone, to look at me the way a parent did their children, and I tried and acted my best while staying at the orphanage. Yet, no one ever wanted to adopt me. They only looked at me with those eyes that were more frightening than anything I can ever remember. They were like ice, no colder than that, staring at me with an intent to kill if they could, and I think I would have felt better if they did. I hated being alive, waking up every day trying to prove that I could be someone a parent could love and just being rejected by every individual that even dared to glance at me. The adults never let their children play with me, and in time even they began to despise me like their parents did. I was alone and hated, and I didn't know why, so I just cried. I'll never admit it to anyone, but back then I cried every night before I went to sleep and in the morning when I knew I'd wake up just to have people leave me in the road, curse me, and sometimes they even decided to beat me up. I just wanted them to love me, to acknowledge my existence, to let me know that they knew that I was alive and they accepted that fact. I began to believe that my sole purpose for being here was to be hated by others, and that maybe this was how they would acknowledge my existence. Even though I had a fairly good sense of right and wrong for quite some time, no one bothered to teach me the difference. Therefore, I resolved to turn myself into the one who would draw their attention and keep them preoccupied, since they were going to overlook my status as a needy child. I can see that I initially felt no pride, but as I continued, I found it increasingly enjoyable. While Iruka-sensei was talking about the headmaster, the village's most respected figure, he assumed I wasn't paying attention. However, I vowed to myself that I would eventually become the headmaster. Who is the headmaster? The headmaster is the village's most powerful ninja, its leader, and the individual most esteemed throughout Konohagakure. This individual will risk their life to defend everyone in the village and mourn the loyalty of all who are around him. It wasn't until I learned more about the old man third headmaster that I grasped the true significance of that, as he was the one who showed me what it meant to be a headmaster. I vowed to myself that I would succeed him, but I understood that there were no shortcuts to reaching that goal, and even then, I realized that becoming a headmaster would not be straightforward. Looking back, I came to understand that I was never truly proficient at the academy and that my 3 failures marked the first time this happened in Konohagakure's history. Even though I was engulfed by hatred and loneliness, I wasn't entirely alone during those times. My best friend and greatest rival, Uchiha Sasuke, and I were like 2 sides of the same coin. Everyone adored him while they all despised me. It was alright, however, since I had made a promise to myself to become headmaster, and thus it was acceptable for them to look down on me. Throughout my time at the academy, I was never able to master the replication technique. One of my teachers told me that anyone who learned a technique from the Forbidden Scroll would pass automatically, so I made every effort to master it. I practiced tirelessly until I eventually mastered both the Shadow Clone Replication and Kijibushin no Spirit techniques. At that moment, Iruka-sensei found me out, and I understood that my impending transformation into the Nine Beast, yielding to fury and killing anyone I could, was the cause of everyone's hatred. It was only after Iruka-sensei's acceptance of me that this changed. Iruka-sensei empowered me to forgive everyone and move forward on my path to becoming the next headmaster. The first person to accept me was someone I believed disliked me the most. It was at that moment I understood that his tough demeanor towards me was a sign of his care for me. Team 7's Journal Entry Number 2. Iruka-sensei informed me that I would be moving on from his tutoring to work in a 3-man cell led by a Jounin, the highest rank of ninja aside from becoming headmaster. After Iruka-sensei treated me to some ramen, I decided to get ready to meet my new team. However, on the way to my apartment, those icy daggers continued to wash me cruelly, and villagers began questioning the wisdom of allowing me to become a Genin, not realizing that I'm not the Nine Beast. However, what transpired afterward is irrelevant, as contemplating it causes me pain and anger. However, the other team members were a surprise. I had been paired with 2 people I had always secretly wanted to be on a team with, my crush, Haruno Sakura, and Uchiha Naruto, my fiercest rival and current best friend. As Temari took in those words, she began to feel quite uncomfortable. She couldn't understand the reason, as it was common knowledge that the blonde shinobi had feelings for the pink-haired kunoichi. Looks like someone is feeling a bit jealous, huh Temari? She inquired of herself, disregarding the voice in her head that persisted. Naruto friend was the top ninja at school, so I was happy to be teamed up with him as I wanted to befriend the only person I knew who understood loneliness. He seemed to despise me, so I acted as if I despised him in return, despite the fact that he was everything I looked up to. On the other hand, Sakura was the smartest Genin of our year and, in my eyes, the prettiest. I vowed to do everything I could to win her affection and keep her safe, but even she detested me. Despite that refusal, I managed to persuade myself that Sakura would come to like me if I could demonstrate my worth as a man. Even as I write these words, I know she will always be Naruto's friend. Reality is painful, and when I came to that realization, it felt like my heart, if I even had one, was shattered and splintered because I love someone who would never love me in return. Nevertheless, I will proceed. That is a different tale for a different occasion. After waiting for a while and realizing that the 6th headmaster sensei was always tardy, he chose to administer the bell test to us. I didn't quite succeed at it, and he even executed an excruciating move on me. Temari began to read about Naruto's bell test in this very agonizing maneuver, and she started to mentally mark that she should eliminate the 6th headmaster if the opportunity arose. While Naruto continued reading, maybe she would kill the pink-headed twit while she was at it, as she was a constant source of pain for him to worry about. The first mission is approaching soon, and it might serve as a chance for me to demonstrate my worth as well as provide a distraction from the odd nightmares about the desert that I've been experiencing. Aha! It is completed at last! Naruto beamed as he surveyed the table laden with the dinner he had made in the section that was solely ramen for him. As this was for Temari, he hoped she would take pleasure in it. I've got to hand it to you, kid. It's acceptable, but had I not recalled everything, you would have been completely out of your depth. Hey, but you're surely up for some Lolo love raving tonight. The opportunity to both compliment and mock the boy was irresistible for Nine Beast, and she savored each word that went unutilized. In a furious manner, Naruto swore and grumbled, while flushing, "You blasted kitsune, stop talking. I'm not trying to get into her pants, you silly pervert, so just leave me be. So, kid, are you leaning left? Absolutely not. You're a baka kitsune, and I don't have feelings for the same sex. Naruto genuinely felt fatigued by the 9 beasts inside while blocking out any critical thoughts. He began to head into the living room to inform his guests that dinner was ready, but he halted immediately upon entering. "Nani?" he inquired, recalling the guest room. "Ah, perhaps she went to see if she could get comfortable here." He reflected. Maybe she put on something more comfortable. "Kid. Hee, cease your chatter, you silly fox." As he approached the guest room door, he knocked on it. He hesitated to enter without warning, as she could have been changing her clothes, but he couldn't help envisioning her in a black slip. Upon hearing a crash, he opened the door, thinking she could have been injured, but to his surprise, he found Temari lying on her back with his journal beside her on the floor. "Naruto-san?" For the first time in her life, Temari felt vulnerable and exposed as she gulped. Although she had been a guest at his house, her down-in-ranked abilities had caused her to awkwardly invade his privacy. She placed a high value on privacy. Why, then, did she find it so hard to refrain from doing so? Temari had to avoid appearing weak, particularly not in front of him at this moment. "Naruto-san, ich, sagte sie, doch Hirschnitter das Wort ab." As the Jounin stood up, she directed her gaze toward his feet rather than at him, then she looked directly upward and locked eyes with him. The boy's voice turned frigid as he focused his gaze on the kunoichi's body, saying, "Temari-chan." She was interrupted again while she was in the midst of apologizing for her behavior. "Yes, Naruto-san, I apologize she said. When Naruto said, "Dinner's ready, Temari-chan, and get ready to tell me how great my amazing cooking is," his expression completely replaced the reaper-like tone that had just been put there moments before. He seemed to be overly energetic now and was indifferent to the fact that he was caught red-handed reviewing his private thoughts. Granted, what she had read was from 3 years after the event, but still, first her vague and mirror-nish sour? It was a straightforward question, yet it left Temari completely stunned for the second time in her life as her faith in her tough facade started to weaken. "Naruto-san, you're not angry at me, right?" "Oh man! Temari-chan, you should have seen the expression on your face. And nah, if you want, we can discuss what you read. But yeah, it's fine with me if you want to find out something about me, I guess," Naruto said, grinning widely and finally letting loose his laughter. He is okay with me finding out about, oh, I get it. Since Naruto has been alone for quite some time, it must feel great to have someone who wants to learn more about him beyond just his confidence and smile. Temari said with a grin as she neared the younger teen, who was already fidgeting with his fingers. "Well Naruto-kun, don't keep me waiting too long, if you know what I mean." She prioritized her self-assurance and emotional boundaries over her own person for the second time. "At last, the time has come for my kid to get laid and maybe even have a litter of his own. Simply consider the blood limit your children could possess, and you will acquire the rugged lover you've been desiring." However, Naruto could only flush and gaze into her eyes with wary caution, saying, "Nani?" Temari smiled with a sly expression, capitalizing on the moment a bit too much for Naruto's good. Although she could have teased the boy for hours, she opted to pull her last trick at that moment. "Naruto-kun, sagte sie, büßt sich auf sich nicht sooner vor, das sich ihr Leben erhärten." Goodness, can it be that the foolish fox is right this time? Temari thought to herself, "You're amazing in the kitchen. Don't let me wait too long, I'm hungry, you know." As her inner critic seemed to be tormenting her again. "At what point did you start calling him Naruto-san, and more crucially, when did Naruto-kun exist?" Temari replied, her mind snarling, "After I finally started to grasp the depth of his loneliness, since I experience it as well, albeit not as intensely as Naruto does and possibly in a different way altogether, my respect for him remained unchanged." "That's right, you want him." Naruto released a mental sigh upon hearing her words. "I suppose she doesn't intend it that way," he remarked. "Sorry, kid. At that point, I assume you will only be able to enjoy her visually, although I have to concede that this is not so bad either." Als Naruto sein Leben bewegte, zu sprechen, stellte er fest, dass sich sein zufällig mit ihren gekreuzt hatten. However, to his relief, Temari's enthusiastic return saved his awkward kiss. She reciprocated it, and he was enjoying it. Their lips being so near to one another made him redden profoundly, his face ablaze as though with 1,000 white suns, as mentioned in the Fairly Odd Parents lawsuit, and I'm anticipating it. As events unfolded, two eyes would be looking in from outside the window of Naruto's guest room. A deep sigh escaped into the gentle night breeze. It seemed that her chance to have Naruto all to herself or to be alone with him was gone, as he was busy entertaining himself with a lip lock with a certain Sanku no Ichi. Upon discovering Naruto's departure, she had to have put it off. Why couldn't she have been clever and told him immediately? Dan auf Wiedersehen, ohne dass die beiden es merkten, and Schwant gestalt. Meanwhile, Naruto was bewildered about the reasons for Temari's response to his kiss. She was certainly skilled at it, but also about the source of his pleasure. After all, he had lost Sakura to his Naruto friend years ago, so why wasn't he faithful to her now? Come on, kid, what does that girl with the pink hair have that Temari doesn't? You're relishing her flavor, right? It's simply incredible. Temari found herself enveloped in a fog of bewilderment and deviant musings simultaneously, as a substitute for Naruto's warmth 9 beast. What was the reason for her kissing him back? Although she recognized it was accidental, beneath that clumsy kiss lay something that grasped her desires. It was a simple answer: Temari wanted to kiss him, and she knew he wanted it just as much, if not more. Along with instructing him on how to enhance his kissing abilities, you can also teach him other personal skills. At this point, both Naruto and Temari were panting, staring at one another with bewilderment evident on their faces, and they flushed at the rapid thoughts in their minds. Regarding Naruto, they too distanced themselves while gazing at the other person, their eyes betraying a trace of remorse. Yes, she has a good flavor, couldn't feel if he Katen or Werbin. However, I love Sakura-chan, right? Is he already past that Uchiha fanatic? She is among those I value highly. Is it possible that I could grow to love him? Would it be possible for him to come to love me? I wish our kiss had lasted longer. Right now, I wish I were kissing him. The more each ninja reflected, the more complex the situation became. After both of them had sighed, they came to the realization that their thoughts were aligned on one point after their breathing had leveled out. Das ist unklar.